All right, so I'm going to review and talk through some homework problems just in case some people were struggling or they want to see how I do it. Hopefully this helps you if you were struggling. And this could also help you for tonight's homework for lesson 10. It's just like review. All right, so you were given a function f of x is x plus 5 times x plus 1. So this is a quadratic because if you did use the distributive property, you would have a value of x squared plus, I think, 6x plus 5. That would be, if we were to factor this, this is what the original or the standard form would look like. So this is the factored version of it. This is the two parentheses when we, like, if we separate this by factoring by grouping. So if I wanted to find out the x-intercepts or the roots, which are also called solutions to the graph or the zeros of the graph, all I have to do is set both equal to 0, right? This is part of your like graph factoring by grouping process. So to find the solution or to find x, you set both of these equal to 0. So we have x plus 5 equal to 0 and x plus 1 equal to 0. We set them equal to 0. We're setting f of x equal to 0 because we want to find out at what value of x does it cross the x-axis, because when you cross the x-axis, you have an x value, but your y value is always going to be 0 no matter where you are on that x-axis. So that's why we set it equal to 0. We're evaluating the function for where y is 0 and where x is a number. So if we solve for x, our roots or our x-intercepts or whatever you want to call them, solutions, are these two numbers. Okay, so that is where it hits the x-axis at -5 and -1. Okay, so that's all I know so far. So if we were to graph this you can do this on your calculator or you can use GeoGebra graphing calculator. I put this right into the graphing calculator and it shows me that I am right, that the roots, and they do call them roots on here, which is cool, are -1 and -5. It's where across the x-axis. Okay. On the homework they asked you for the vertex, the axis symmetry, direction of opening, and all these other things. So let's first do vertex. So vertex, they show me right here. It's called an extremum because it's like an extreme or a minimum or maximum. If you can tell from this graph, this is a minimum because it's at the bottom. It's the lowest value. It's the lowest y value on this graph. So our vertex, they're telling us, is -3, -4, which means my axis symmetry is this line in the middle. So if I were to plot that, and I'll show you. So my axis symmetry is x equals -3. It's that x value of my vertex, basically. So my blue line right there is that axis of symmetry because it splits the parabola symmetrically in half. Okay? So if you weren't, so another way, if you like didn't graph it, you know that where it's crossing the x-axis is -5 and -1. So basically another way to find it is finding the midpoint between those two numbers. So what is directly in the middle, or what has to be? So you can use the midpoint formula. Some of you may have counted, right? How many does it take to get to the middle? Well, there's 4 spaces in between, right? In between here. 4 divided by 2 is 2, so you have to count 2 spaces from both sides. You'd end up at -3. Or you could have used the midpoint formula or find the average, right? So -5 plus -1 divided by 2 would get you the same thing of -3. So this is our value of x. This is my axis of symmetry, okay, which I just showed you. But this is how you would do it by hand. So this was axis of sim work. Okay. So now that you know that x equals -3 for that axis of symmetry, okay, how do I find the point of the vertex? Again, if you did not graph it. So I already know the vertex are telling me is -3, -4, but what if, you didn't know how to use your graph? There also is a function on the calculator to find the vertex. You would hit, what would you hit? Hold on. if you hit second calc, under all those, you can find, remember, we did minimum, maximum. So that's one way you can find the vertex. But let's say you didn't know the vertex. You know x, though. Well, basically, you're asking yourself, at what value of y is x negative 3? Well, you were given a function in the beginning to represent this relationship. So use it. Use it. You can plug remember, you can plug an x in to find a y. This is considered y. So if I plug in negative 3, I should be able to get my y value for my vertex. So this is going to be 2 times 2, which gives me f of negative 3, which equals 4. Negative 4 because it's a negative 2. So that means when x is 3, y equals negative 4. So my vertex point is negative 3, negative 4, which is what I showed you here. Okay, but that's how you do it by hand. The calculator is great. Maybe some of you didn't do it by hand. I'm not sure how maybe you have a suggestion for others to do it by if I don't mention it. So please, tell us, because then you're helping everyone. So we found the vertex, found the axis symmetry, the direction of the opening. Well, if you look at my graph here, which way is it opening? It's opening up. So that's how you would say it, opening up. It's a U-shaped parabola. That means the A value is positive, which it is, right? If you look at our equation in our table here, there's no negative in front of our parentheses. It's a positive, so it's going to open up. That's how you know it's going to open up or down. The min or max value, again, is that vertex. We just said this is a minimum, and it's the same value of negative 3, negative 4. What else did they ask you? And they asked you for the y-intercept. So if you did graph it, this is easy. You can just look at your graph. My y-intercept is 0, 5. Go ahead and use GeoGebra if you see that this may be easier than using your graphing calculator. It's up to you, right? This is a resource you guys can use. It really does give you a lot of information. So the y-intercept is 0, 5. But again, I'll show you how to find it if you did not have a calculator. So we're looking for the y-intercept. That was the last part of the homework they asked you at the top. So let's think about it. The y-intercept is when what is 0? If we look at this point here. When x is 0. So when x is 0, what is y? Basically is what we're asking ourselves. So again, you have a function, use it. So f of x, we're using our original function here in the table, x plus 5, x minus 1. But I'm going to substitute in the 0 plus 1. So if I evaluate this, 0 plus 5 is 5, times 0 plus 1 is 1. So f of 0 equals 5 times 1, which is just 5. That means when x is 0, y is 5. So the y-intercept point is 0, 5, which they did show me on the graph. All right. So that's going through that number 3. The rest are really similar. If there is a negative in front, so like for number 4, it was negative x minus 4, x minus 2. You're going to realize that it's just going to curve down after there's a negative in the front. So we have this. Nope, I don't want that. Delete. Graph. All right, let's find it. There it is. See, it's curving down because there's a negative in front now. The solutions are 2 and 4, right? Because if we set these parentheses equal to each other, it's just basically the opposite. The y-intercept is 0, negative 8. That axis of symmetry would be in the middle of 2 and 4, which is 3, 1 is the vertex. Okay, again, so that kind of helps. And then the other two, again, were really similar. So I'll post those answers, but this was just like a nice review.